Chapter 123. Sulen stored the Cryopterus meat in the warehouse. The Cryopterus meat could not be stored for a long time, so they were all made into dragon's breast. With the gourmet Frodo around, the taste of the dragon's breast was naturally very good. The 6 Cryopterus had a total of about 5 tons of meat and some internal organs. The internal organs had been preserved and given to Hathaway to process. These organs could be used to make magic potions. After the 5 tons of dragon meat were all made, there were about 2 tons of dragon's breast. Sulen gave some to Frodo as a gift. Of course, Frodo also gave some of the various spices he had collected to Sulen as a return gift. In this era, spices were not cheap. Although it was not as expensive as a kinnar for a few grains of pepper, it was still very expensive. For example, the cheapest pepper cost 500 kinnar per kilogram. Sulen had to buy spices from the caravans that came to trade every month. Now that he had these spices, Sulen planned to grow some in his territory. The spices trade had always been the most important trade in the southern seas. Many spices were produced on the islands in the southern seas. Even if Sulen could grow spices, the scale and quality of the spices would not be as good as the spices in the southern seas. Frodo was very curious about Sulen's territory. It was completely different from the cities he had been to before. It was too clean and tidy. He did not understand why Sulen spent so much effort and money on this place. Another thing that piqued his interest was the delicacies here. The rum tasted very good, and Frodo fell in love with it immediately. Other than the rum, there was also the way the food was cooked. On the continent, boiling, frying, and so on were the most popular methods. However, when he came here, he realized that they were actually stir-frying. The stir-frying method was indeed different. First, it required a special wok. Then, it would be fried with oil. The taste was indeed very delicious. Frodo had been going to the kitchen every day, and Sulen did not stop him. He wanted the gourmet to visit more often. Every time he went there, Frodo would cook a sumptuous and delicious meal, which was much better than what Sulen and the other chefs could cook. Moreover, following Frodo's cooking, the chef's cooking skills had also improved. Sulen even wanted Frodo to train several qualified chefs for him. Other than stir-frying, Frodo also liked eating ice cream. After trying the ice cream that was made with cream, honey, white sugar, and fruits, he instantly fell in love with it. He asked Sulen to learn how to make ice cream. In order to learn how to make ice cream, Frodo signed a lot of contracts. For example, he would help to plant spices, teach the chefs how to cook, and make a delicious meal every day. Sulen hung the head of a Cryopterus on the city wall of his territory. The ogre wizard accompanied the head. Those who were worried about the Cryopterus attack and wanted to escape immediately gave up the idea after seeing the head of the Cryopterus. A lord who could slay dragons was very rare in the human world. Sulen's reputation in his territory increased tremendously. If one opened the system's interface, they would find that the number of people who had fallen to 50 due to the arrival of the refugees and the pterosaurs had increased to 87 in just one day, and it was still increasing. The 6 Cryopterus obtained quite a lot of dragon skins. Although a lot of them were damaged in the battle, there was still a lot left. A pterosaur with a wingspan of 12 meters was even bigger than a raging wind tiger's. However, not all dragon skins were suitable for making leather armor. The ones on the wings were more suitable for making blank scrolls. Sulen and Hathaway calculated that they could make at least 110 sets of leather armor from the pterosaur skins. The pterosaur leather armor was tough and had a natural +1 enchantment. If they could find an alchemist to enchant it, they could make a good magic equipment. Other than these, there were also 3 dragon penises. These were good stuff. If they were auctioned in Cult City, the nobles would go crazy for them. If there was a chance, Sulen could prepare an auction to attract more people to his territory. After dealing with these things, Sulen looked at the 13 dragon eggs in his hand. It was not easy to hatch a pterosaur dragon egg. It required a special environment. Just like how red dragons needed a rich fire element to hatch, these Cryopteris needed an environment rich in ice element to hatch. However, even if the environment was suitable, the incubation rate of Cryopteris was not high. In fact, the incubation rate of giant dragons was not high. Under normal circumstances, it would be good to have a 50% incubation rate. If Sulan wanted to hatch these dragon eggs, he would need to prepare a professional incubation room. Luckily, Hathaway knew how to build an incubation room to hatch pterosaurs. After all, dragons were powerful creatures. Many wizards were studying their secrets. There was a time when many dragon apprentices appeared among the wizards. These dragon apprentices were different from normal sorcerers. Their physical attributes were off the charts. It was said that there was a legendary dragon apprentice whose body was even stronger than a legendary warrior. Although their spells were not as powerful as wizards, they were still very strong. Pterosaur dragon eggs could not be stored for long. If they were placed in a normal environment, the incubation rate of the pterosaur dragon egg would be reduced. The second day after Sulan returned to his territory, he began to build an incubation room with Hathaway. The incubation room had to be clean and tidy. It was best to build an elemental pool in the room. Abundant elemental energy was very helpful for the hatching of dragons. Of course, this was something only the great wizards could do. Building an elemental pool was not as simple as digging a puddle. The elemental pool gathered liquefied elemental energy. In order to reach this level in the main material world, one had to connect the 4 major elemental planes. This step alone could only be done by a great wizard. Of course, one also needed to have the coordinates of the 4 major elemental planes. At the same time, one also needed to be on guard against the elemental creatures that might come and cause trouble when the channel was connected. The elemental pool was also the essence of a wizard tower. Only a wizard tower with an elemental pool could be considered a real wizard tower. Without an elemental pool, no matter how tall and grand the tower was, it would still be an ordinary building. It was meaningless to a wizard. Therefore, only wizards above the level of a great wizard could have their own wizard tower. It was very difficult to build an elemental pool. At least, from the various materials that Hathaway reported, Sulan could not afford them. Astral dust, arcane crystals, all kinds of magic gems, arcane dust, runic steel, etc. They were all very expensive. Chapter 124. It was impossible to build an elemental pool right now, unless Hathaway advanced to the level of a great wizard. However, the incubation room still needed to be built. High-quality incubation rooms had high-quality incubation rooms, and low-quality incubation rooms had low-quality incubation rooms. There were not many requirements for the main building of the incubation room. Sulan had built it in no time. Without an elemental pool, Hathaway was going to build a rune circle to gather the surrounding elemental energy. Elemental energy was widespread in the main material world, but except for a few places, most places did not have a high concentration of elemental energy. These elemental energies usually wandered around. Wizards had discovered runes that could gather elemental energy, and they would use these runes to form a rune circle to gather the wandering elemental energy. More advanced runes could even connect with the energy of the earth veins and transform an area into an elemental active area. It was said that only the most powerful wizard organizations could do this, and those organizations would also use this technology to cultivate all kinds of magical plants. The incubation room built by Sulan had an area of 150 square meters. Each ice Quetzalcoatlus egg occupied an area of 10 square meters. In addition to the runic matrices, it was better to put some ice magic stones in the incubation room to hatch the ice Quetzalcoatlus. Hathaway had some cold moon stones in her hand. They were moon-white stones, a kind of low-level magic stone. They felt cold in her hand. Although they were low-level magic stones, they were enough to hatch cryopterous eggs. After all, it was just a Euron. The incubation room was made of marble, and the floor was made of obsidian. In fact, it would have been better to use obsidian, but Sulan did not have that many obsidian stones. Hathaway summoned the wizard's hand and used a special rune-carving knife to carve a rune circle on the obsidian. She spent the whole morning carving hundreds of runes in the room. Then she used the blood of the ice Quetzalcoatlus and some other magic materials to make rune ink. She blended the rune ink with the engraved runes, and the rune circle was completed. Activate it and test its effect. Hathaway snapped her fingers and stored all the raw materials before activating the runic matrix. The nodes lit up one by one, and the runic matrix was officially activated. Sulan felt a breeze appear in the room and then disappear. Why isn't it working? Could it have failed? Sulan asked curiously after waiting for a while, but nothing happened. How could I fail? I am an intermediate alchemist. Hathaway retorted. Then why aren't there any changes? Sulan pointed at the incubation room. This is a low-level array. It's normal for it to take effect slowly. Hathaway was a little lacking in confidence. Then, she said indignantly, besides, who asked you to not have high-level materials? It's already very good that I can make this for you. Well, okay. Sulan was a little embarrassed. After all, he couldn't ask for too much if the materials were not good enough. Fortunately, the effects of the runic matrix were still there. After a while, Sulan could clearly feel that the elemental concentration in the incubation room had increased by a lot. Put the cryopterous eggs in these positions. The elemental energy around them will be poured in. Hathaway placed the cryopterous eggs in the designated positions one by one, and then activated the runic matrix. The elemental energy around them was converted into aqua-blue ice elemental energy. Then, it was guided out through the runic matrix. Then, it was transported to the runic matrix in a very gentle manner before it was released slowly. Outside, countless aqua-blue light spots floated up and merged with the cryopterous eggs. That's it? Sulan was a little disappointed. Even a 50-cent special effect would be better than this. Okay, as long as the runic matrix is activated, these cryopterous eggs will slowly hatch, Hathaway said with a relaxed expression. Are you ready for the taming technique? Sulan asked. The main reason why it was difficult to tame dragons was because of their inherited memories. Although Cryopterus was only a Euron, it also had inherited memories. It was just that it was much less than a real dragon. Don't worry, I have already engraved the taming matrix in the runic matrix. When they hatch, the taming will be complete. Hathaway said with a smile. But you have to give me one of these hatched pterosaurs. I want to be a tool. Don't worry, I will definitely give you one. Sulan rubbed Hathaway's head. Ding, the construction of the incubation room is completed. Territory taming has been enhanced. Incubation room, incubates magical beast eggs and increases the incubation rate. There is also a 1% chance that the hatched creature will mutate. Energy gathering +3, incubation effect +3, taming success +10, mutation +1. Incubation status, incubating. Type, Cryopterus. Number, 13. Estimated incubation time, 46 days. Looking at the incubation room's attributes, Sulan was a little surprised. He didn't expect this building to be recognized by the system. Looking at the attributes of the incubation room, it could even increase the incubation rate. As for the 1% mutation rate, it depended on luck. After placing the cryopterous eggs, Sulan and Hathaway left the incubation room. They found 2 barbarian warriors and asked them to guard the incubation room and not let anyone else in. Sulan then left with Hathaway. The incubation rate of a dragon egg was generally about 50%. As a subspecies of Cryopterus, it was slightly higher, but it still only had a 60% incubation rate. In fact, the incubation rate of a dragon egg would become obvious after a period of incubation. The stronger the dragon egg, the higher the incubation rate. Dragon eggs that had low vitality or had begun to weaken would not hatch. As their vitality weakened, these dragon eggs would eventually become dead eggs. In fact, even after a Cryopteris was hatched, it would take at least 5 years to grow before it could be used in battle. Cryopteris needed 10 years to reach adulthood. Their lifespan was between 200 and 300 years. It was very difficult to train them to become dragon knights. After all, Sulan didn't have a suitable person to be a dragon knight. The barbarians were more suitable for rushing forward. Humans could do it, but to become a dragon knight, they needed to be at least a knight commander. The drows were quite suitable. They were strong, light, and agile. It was just that the drows didn't trust Sulan yet. Sulan had always been envious of the drows. It was said that the drows were very open and had good figures. They had slim waists, full buttocks, long legs, charming looks, high flexibility, and superb riding skills. Bah, I'm saying that the drows are very suitable to be scouts. Chapter 125. Sulan was playing with an exquisite token. There was only a relief of a soldier on the token. The back of the token was smooth and there was nothing on it. This token was the reinforcement order that he had obtained from the golden treasure chest. According to the system, this token could summon a troop of soldiers. Sulan was a little hesitant. He was not sure what kind of soldiers the system would summon. Forget it, I'll just summon them and see. Sulan threw the token up and put it into his pocket. He then rode his horse and left the town. Without bringing anyone, Sulan left the territory alone and found an empty wilderness. Sulan took out the reinforcement order and hesitated for a while before choosing to use it. A light flashed and the reinforcement order disappeared. Then, a system notification rang in his ears. Ding! The host has used the reinforcement order. A troop of soldiers is about to arrive. Just when Sulan was puzzled, a portal opened in midair. Then, a troop of soldiers walked out of the portal. These soldiers were wearing armor and holding weapons. There were about 40 of them. Half of them were spearmen and the other half were archers. Their equipment looked good. Soon, 2 soldiers who should be the team leaders walked to Sulan and saluted. "General, the spearmen and archers have all arrived." Sulan was a little surprised to see these soldiers in front of him. Although they looked like ordinary people, they were completely different creatures in the system interface. Otherworld creature, war spirit, otherworld warriors summoned by magic. They do not have a physical body. Only when the summoning is successful will they automatically transform into something you are familiar with. They are loyal mercenaries. After death, they will return to the otherworld and wait for the next summoning. After communicating with these soldiers, Sulan realized that each of these war spirits had their own names and independent thoughts. They were like living humans, but in fact, they were similar to heroic spirits. Although their bodies looked like humans, they were actually made of energy. He opened the system interface and found this team in the military column. Loyalty and morale were both at 80, which was within the normal range. The system's products were really good. The 2 teams of spearmen and archers in front of him were all veterans. The 20 spearmen had all reached the level of elite spearmen, and the captain had reached the level of heavy armored spearmen. The heavy armored spearmen were already at the level of knights. Although they were not as strong as barbarians, they were not afraid of death, which was very scary. Similarly, the group of archers in front of him were all elite longbowmen. The advancement of archers started from recruit archer, then longbowman, elite longbowman, strong longbowman, and finally sharpshooters. As for condor archers, it was a special advancement. The captain of the archer squad was also a knight-ranked archer. Su Luan checked the attributes of the spearmen. They were weaker than the barbarians, but they also had the talents of strength, tenacity, and courage. They also had a passive skill, good training, and 3 skills. Good training. Long-term strict training allows them to familiarize themselves with various military skills. Even if they encounter a surprise attack, they can form a suitable military formation in the shortest time possible. They are disciplined and obedient. They are rare elite soldiers. Courage. After strict training, the spearmen dare to face any military formation. Will +2. Spear formation. Spear formation, basic skill of the spearman. After strict training, the spearman will form a dense defensive spear formation. Stab. Stab, increase attack speed by 50%. Stab with a weapon in an instant. Armor break +2 effect. There is a certain chance of piercing. Spear assault. Spear assault, elite spearmen form a cone formation to perform a rapid assault. Movement speed increased by 50%. Attack power increased by 50%. Armor break +3 and piercing effect. After the assault, they will enter a weakened state. All attributes reduced by 20%. Spear assault made Sullen's eyes light up. This skill was completely used to deal with large-scale battles. The more the number, the more destructive it would be. When 2 armies suddenly used it in a battle, it could directly break through the enemy's defense line. Of course, the weakness of this skill was obvious. If the enemy had a large number of archers, they would suffer heavy losses. However, Su Len did not care. After all, there were definitely many types of soldiers on the battlefield. It was rare for a single type of soldier to appear. The attributes of the archers were not weak. These archers looked strong and muscular. Their arms, especially, were obviously thicker than the spearmen. Because they often used the bow, their arms were very strong. Archers were not weak in close combat. In fact, they were not weaker than ordinary soldiers except for not wearing armor. There were many cases of the English longbowman in his previous life. The French soldiers wore heavy armor and risked their lives to rush through the rain of arrows of the English longbowmen. It was not easy to get close to them. They imagined that they could kill these longbowmen like cutting vegetables. In the end, because of the heavy armor, the long-distance running caused their physical strength to be exhausted. Instead, they were defeated by the archers in close combat. These archers had the talents of strength, dexterity, and accuracy. Dexterity, body is flexible. Attack speed increases by 20%. Dexterity +2. Accuracy, accuracy increases by 20%. They also had the passive skill of good training. The skills of the archers were also good. 3 skills: volley, continuous shot, and long shot. Volley. After strict training, the archers are able to form a dense formation and launch a rain of arrows at an area. Rapid fire. After arduous training, these archers have become very proficient in their skills. They can fire 3 arrows consecutively in a short period of time, causing a large area of damage with arrows. Armor break +1, long shot, attack range increases by 20%. Attack speed decreases by 50%. Arrows are powerful. Armor break +2, in fact, the value of the archers among these soldiers was higher than that of the spearmen. A spearman's training time was short and it was easy to become a fighting force. Archers were different. In addition to physical fitness, they also needed some talent and skills. Therefore, the price of archers' training was higher. After the group of soldiers in front of him joined Sullen's camp, Su Len had to pay them a salary. If the salary was delayed, their morale would drop. At the same time, their loyalty would also decrease. Once the loyalty fell below 60, these soldiers could defect at any time. The cost of maintaining these soldiers was not low. A spearman needed 3 kinnar a month, and an archer needed 4 kinnar a month. In addition to these, there were also various logistical supplies such as food and equipment. A group of 40 people would need to spend thousands of kinnar a year. However, compared to their combat power, it was all worth it. Su Len brought these soldiers back to the territory. As for the origin of these soldiers, he only said that they were here to seek refuge. It did not matter whether others believed it or not. After all, this was Su Len's territory. He had the final say. These soldiers were arranged to stay in the barracks. Su Len had already ordered people to build new homes for them. Su Len had already treated these soldiers as humans and not the cold numbers of the system. After all, other than Su Len, no one knew that they were summoned by the system. Chapter 126. The military strength of the Northgard castle had changed a lot. There were only 71 barbarian warriors in the beginning, but now, there were a total of 186, including the security team and the new recruits. 30 security team, 40 new recruits, 40 new recruits, and 5 scouts who had just finished their training. Together with the barbarian guards, this was Su Len's military strength. The population of the Northgard castle had exceeded 2,000 people. Of course, 70% of them were Su Len's serfs. Even the refugees had to work for Su Len to survive. Because of the trade, there would be a few caravans coming to the Northgard castle every month. The sugar from the Northgard castle was very popular in the northern provinces. Because of the sugar, the high-quality rum had successfully opened up a market among the nobles. It had been almost 4 months since Su Len came to the Northgard castle. This small town deep in the northern wastelands had gained some fame among the nobles. As long as nothing unexpected happened, Su Len would become a real landed noble. By then, many nobles would come to curry favor with him. After all, a rising landed noble could enfeoff a large number of low-ranked nobles. Su Len had never thought of accepting those nobles' allegiance. Those nobles would surely fail. He had no intention of enfeoffing them. He was busy harvesting food now. It had been more than 3 months since the first piece of farmland had been cultivated. The first batch of potatoes had matured after about 100 days. The remaining potatoes would also mature in the next half a month. As long as there was a good harvest of potatoes this year, Su Len's territory would not suffer from a famine even if they stopped planting potatoes in the next few years. Of course, from next year onwards, Su Len would reduce the number of potatoes planted and switch to wheat and other crops. After all, he did not want to keep eating potatoes, noodles, steamed buns, and scallion pancakes. Weren't they delicious? Why would he eat potatoes when he had the money? He planned to slowly try all the different delicacies from his previous life. The first batch of land cultivated in the Northgard castle was a good paddy field. The soil was quite fertile. Although there was no fertilizer, the yield of potatoes was still quite good. Arriving at the first batch of potato fields, Su Len randomly selected a few pieces of farmland, and then let the serfs begin to harvest the grain. "Monsignor, I've arranged for people to take care of the land you've allocated." A servant came to Su Len's side and said. Su Len looked around and found that the serfs were ready. He nodded and said, "Let's start." "Begin." A soldier with a loud voice shouted from the side. Along with his order, the serfs in the specially selected fields began to harvest potatoes with various tools. The soft soil was turned over. He grabbed the vine and pulled it out forcefully. Strings of potatoes were pulled out from the soil. After shaking off the soil, the potatoes, which were at least the size of a fist, were arranged into a string. It looked very pleasing, and a string of potatoes weighed a few kilograms. The vines of the potatoes were removed, and the fruits were thrown into the bamboo basket at the side. The potatoes in each plot of land were placed together to be weighed. This was done to maximize the estimation of the yield per mu of land. Although there were still errors, the difference was not big. Through this, the yield of potatoes this year could be roughly estimated. 1 mu of land was not big, and these serfs were very fast. They all wanted to leave a good impression in front of Su Len. As long as Su Len was happy and rewarded them with a few points, they would be able to get their freedom faster and then have their own land. These people were very satisfied. Soon, the potatoes in the vicinity of 1 mu of land were harvested. Su Len asked people to weigh the potatoes. After the soil was sifted off, the potatoes in the baskets were weighed. The potatoes produced in each plot of land were weighed and marked one by one. Potatoes were a crop widely planted in this world. The staple food of most civilians was potatoes. Who asked this crop to be easy to grow and have a high yield? Only a small amount of land would grow crops such as rice and wheat, which were usually used to pay taxes. Moreover, rice and wheat were basically used as daily food by nobles or big merchants. The taxes in this world were not low, because the taxes in various places were set by the lords. The benevolent ones were fine, but the greedy ones would collect all kinds of taxes, such as catching fish in the river, cutting firewood in the mountains, and paying a poll tax every year. In short, all kinds of taxes were collected from clothing, food, housing, and transportation. Every year, when farming, the nobles' land had to be cultivated first before they could plant their own fields. Every week, they had to work for the lords for 3 days. If it were not for potatoes, half of the civilians in this world would have starved to death. About half an hour later, the yield of potatoes in these plots of land was calculated. Among them, the yield of potatoes in the largest plot of land was 303 kilograms, and the yield of potatoes in the smallest plot of land was 254 kilograms. The yield of 200 kilograms was not too high. Because it was a new plot of land, the yield in the first year would be lower. Next year, when there was fertilizer, the yield would be higher. Even with the current yield, the yield of these plots of land was enough to feed tens of thousands of people. Potatoes could be planted 3 times a year, so for a long time, he did not have to worry about food. After the food problem was solved, Su Len could increase the number of people brought in. At least 300,000 mu of land could be cultivated in Northtown Castle, enough to feed 50 to 60,000 people. Right now, only about 10,000 mu of land had been cultivated. He did not want to leave those plots of land empty. Northtown Castle was located in a remote area, but if it were not so remote, it would not be his turn to cultivate this land. It would have been occupied by others long ago, so there was nothing to complain about. If Su Len wanted people, he could only rely on the trade caravans to bring in refugees every time, or buy slaves from Cult City himself. However, both of these methods required a lot of money, and the results were slow. Unless Su Len was confident that he could get a recruitment order every once in a while, this was the best way. As for the drows, Su Len also wanted to recruit them. The drows were also a powerful race, and compared to the obvious shortcomings of the barbarians, the drows had almost no shortcomings. Of course, if they did not believe in the Dark Maiden, Su Len would not have dared to accept them. Except for the drows who believed in the Dark Maiden, in Sullen's opinion, 9 out of 10 drows were mentally ill. They plotted all kinds of schemes and murders every day. If they had the time, they might as well practice their riding skills. So far, Su Len still did not take the initiative to get in touch with the drows. After experiencing the escape and finally settling down, the drows were actually very sensitive and insecure. They had lived in an environment of mutual deception for a long time, which made it difficult for them to trust others. The best way for Su Len now was to express some kindness to them, but not to get too close to them. In fact, Su Len had already treated the drows as meat in his mouth. Those drows who lived in the underworld all year round could not adapt to the environment of the northern wilderness. One could not imagine how cold the winter in the northern wilderness was without experiencing it. Chapter 127. Frodo the Halfling was very happy during this period of time. Not only did he find the spices in the wilderness, but he also learned a new way of cooking, stir-frying. This new way of cooking surprised Frodo. During this period of time, he made many delicious dishes under the guidance of Sulen. He was now very confident that he would be able to participate in the King of Chefs tournament and win the championship when he returned to the Shire. At the same time, he was also very curious about Sulen's cooking. After all, these dishes were all Sulen's suggestions. Ice cream, red braised pork, stir-fried pork, mushroom stir-fried pork, cumin mutton, and many other dishes were all suggested by him. Frodo almost wanted to take apart Sulen's brain to see how many strange ideas were hidden in it. For example, just now, Sulen told him how to make a snack called potato chips. Frodo had already tried to make it according to Sulen's description. The reason why Sulen made potato chips was because there were too many potatoes. He could not eat mashed potatoes every day, so making some snacks was a good idea. The process of making potato chips was not difficult. All he had to do was to cut the potato chips into thin slices and fry them in a pot of oil until golden brown. When he took them out of the pot, he just had to sprinkle some spices on them. The only difficult part was cutting the potato chips. However, this was just a basic operation for a rogue who could play with his dagger. The last time they had a hot pot, Frodo had demonstrated how to slice mutton. He had sliced a large piece of mutton into slices as thin as a cicada's wing in no time. His knife skills were even better than those of the butcher from East Lai Shan in his previous life. Soon, the fragrant potato chips were ready. Sulen tasted one. It was crispy and delicious. It was not much different from the ones he had eaten in his previous life. Hathaway and Chris liked it even more. From today onwards, other than ice cream, they also added potato chips to their snacks. Hey, Sulen, your territory has a good harvest. Do you want to hold a harvest festival or some other celebration? I think it would be great to hold a fishing competition. Frodo suggested while munching on potato chips. Harvest festival and celebration? What does it do? Sulen was puzzled. Festivals can make the residents of the territory feel happy and increase their sense of belonging to the territory, Frodo said with a smile. All right, I agree. Sulen thought for a while. Organizing a festival in his territory would cost a lot, but just like what Frodo had said, it could increase the sense of belonging of the residents in his territory. In other words, it could increase the morale of the people. After this period of migration, the people's sentiment in Sulen's territory had declined. After all, no matter how good Sulen's treatment was, many of them were still slaves. Although killing the pterosaur had increased the sentiment and stability of the territory by 10 points, it was still around 80 points. You agreed? That's great. Frodo said excitedly. Basically, all halflings loved all kinds of celebrations. I think we can hold a gourmet food competition and a fishing competition. To be honest, in my hometown, the Shire, I have won both the gourmet food competition and fishing competition. This is the first time in hundreds of years that someone has won both the gourmet food competition and fishing competition. Sulen did not believe Frodo's boasting about winning both the gourmet food competition and fishing competition because many halflings would boast like that. However, most of them boasted about winning the fishing competition or the gourmet food competition. It was very rare for someone to win both the gourmet food competition and fishing competition. However, Frodo now had the trump card of cooking. Perhaps he really had the chance to win both the gourmet food competition. As for the champion of the whole Shire, it was not certain. The Shire was a gathering place for villages. Every village would hold such competitions, but there was no unified large-scale competition. Therefore, the champion that Frodo mentioned was most likely the village that won the first place. A gourmet food competition and a fishing competition? I think it's okay, but add an archery competition and a martial arts competition, Sulen said after thinking for a while. Since he had decided to hold a festival, he might as well make it bigger. An archery competition and a martial arts competition? Frodo shrugged. He was not very good at these two competitions, but it should be very lively. That was enough for him. The fishing competition was soon held. There were not many people participating in the fishing competition. Most people went to participate in the martial arts and archery competition. Especially the barbarians, they all signed up for the martial arts competition, while the archers signed up for the archery competition. Sulan did not participate in these two competitions. After all, if he participated, the others would not be able to have fun. Therefore, he brought Hathaway to participate in the fishing competition. This will make it more festive, Frodo said excitedly. Then, he took out a few pieces of a rod from his pocket and connected them together. In a few seconds, he had assembled a fishing rod. Then, he put the bait on and started fishing. Today, I will show you the skills of the Shire's fishing champion. Sulan also made a fishing rod and went to the side to fish. Beside him was Hathaway. Hathaway also participated in the fishing competition, but she was not interested in it. It was Hathaway's first time fishing, but her luck was unexpectedly good. After a while, her fishing float started to sway. She used her arm to pull it up. Don't rush. The fish is testing the water. If you move, it will run away, Sulan quickly stopped her. You are quite lucky. This fish should be a big one. Really? Then why are we eating the big fish tonight? Hathaway said excitedly. It took the bait. At this moment, Hathaway's fishing rod suddenly dropped. The straight fishing rod was bent into a bow, and the fishing line was pulled tightly. Release the line, release the line, release the line slowly. Sulan instructed from the side. Yes, just like that. Release the line slowly. This will exhaust its strength without breaking the fishing line. Isn't this too troublesome? Hathaway frowned. I got it. She snapped her fingers, and a transparent hand suddenly appeared in the water and lifted the big, lively fish out of the water. Sulan was speechless. This fish is at least 15 pounds. Hathaway said excitedly. Sulan said, the fun of fishing is to wrestle with the fish. You rely on a thin fishing line and use superb skills to catch them successfully. Only then will you be satisfied. You are not very flexible when fishing like this. Hathaway did not hear Sulan at all. She threw the fish into the bucket and continued fishing. However, her luck seemed to be off the charts today. Within a few minutes, the second fish took the bait. Sulan did not catch a single fish. Similarly, the boastful Frodo also did not catch a single fish. Next, fishing became a personal show for Hathaway. The third, fourth, and fifth fish were caught one after another. Frodo finally could not sit still. He threw down the fishing rod, picked up a harpoon, and jumped into the water with a splash. Soon, a figure came out of the river with the harpoon in his hand raised high. There was a fish that weighed about 5 kilograms on it. He smiled happily and said, I caught one too. This is a fishing competition, not a harpoon. Sulan rolled his eyes. You are cheating. You are disqualified. In the end, Hathaway won the competition. The prize was 3 plasma cannons. The other competitions also decided the winners. As expected, Johnson won the combat competition. The archer team leader won the archery competition. At night, the territory held a banquet. The entire Northgard castle became very lively. Sulan also heard the system notification. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have successfully held a harvest festival. The people are very satisfied with this festival. Popular sentiment +10. Congratulations to the host. You have activated the festival system. The current festival is Harvest Festival. Having a festival can make the people in your territory peaceful and prosperous. Harvest Festival, a grand festival can bring happiness and a sense of belonging to the people. Popular sentiment +10, prosperity +5. Chapter 128. 5,000 acres of potatoes were harvested. On average, 250 kilograms of potatoes were harvested per acre. After counting, they had harvested a total of 1,250 tons of potatoes. The potatoes were enough to last them for a whole year. Other than that, the Northgard castle also stored a large amount of dried meat and salted fish. Even the spotted antelope was growing well. The Northgard castle was basically self-sufficient now. The harvest festival was over, and the weather in the Northgard castle was getting colder. It was winter now. In order to prepare for the winter, the construction of the territory had slowed down. More slaves and refugees were sent to cut down trees to make charcoal and other supplies for the winter. Sulen was watching Hathaway test a few bottles of potions in her lab. To be honest, he had forgotten about these potions since he found them in the ruins last time. Actually, it was the author who forgot about them. He found them when he was processing the Cryopterus meat. He wanted to show them to Hathaway so she could identify what kind of potion it was and whether it could still be used. Hathaway snapped her fingers and controlled the burette with the wizard's hand. She dripped a few drops of liquid into a measuring cylinder filled with a blue solution. She then shook the liquid evenly. Soon, the liquid in the cylinder underwent some strange changes. Hathaway put down the measuring cylinder and pointed at a bottle of potion. "I'm in luck. This bottle of potion is well preserved. The potion's effect is still intact." "What about the other potions?" Sulen asked. "The rest of the potions are either expired or have lost their effect. They can't be used anymore." "Of course, you can try if you want to poison someone to death," Hathaway said as she resealed the potion and handed it to Sulen. Sulen took the bottle of potion. The red liquid in the crystal bottle bumped against the surface of the bottle and flashed from time to time. It looked a little strange. "What's this potion for?" "It's a bloodline potion. If the right person uses it, he or she will have the corresponding bloodline and become a bloodline warlock." Hathaway poured the rest of the potions into a special container. She then added another type of potion. After a few potions were mixed, it turned into a murky solution. "Bloodline potion? Are you saying that this potion can turn an ordinary person into a warlock?" Sulen asked in surprise. "Hua." Hathaway continued to say, "Don't be happy too early. Although the bloodline potion can allow an ordinary person to become a bloodline warlock, there are prerequisites." "What conditions?" "If the bloodline potion is given to an ordinary person, then the best time to use it is between the ages of 10 to 12, and the latest can't be over 16, because it takes more than a year for the bloodline potion to be fully integrated, and to become a warlock, one must awaken the bloodline before the age of 18. "What if the user is not an ordinary person?" Sulen waved the potion in his hand. "If the user is a wizard or a wizard apprentice, the age limit can be extended to 30 years old. If the user is a knight, it can be extended to 20 years old." Hathaway combed her hair and continued, "But I don't recommend using this bloodline potion." "What's wrong with this bloodline potion?" "There are many types of bloodline potions, and each one has a different potential. The best ones are of course the bloodline potions of high-grade creatures such as dragons. This bloodline potion uses the blood of a mid-grade demon claw, so its potential is limited. Also, demon warlocks are not popular in the main material world. In fact, demon warlocks were not as simple as being unpopular. Because of the integration of the demon bloodline, these people would be constantly influenced by the will of the abyss. The stronger they were, the deeper this influence would be. In the end, they would fall into the abyss and become a real demon. Of course, there were also people in this world who wanted to become demons. After all, there were many people, and there were all kinds of weirdos. After all, after becoming a demon, one's lifespan and strength would be greatly increased. According to the evolution of demons, as long as they didn't die, they could continue to evolve. Even becoming a demon lord was not impossible. Of course, the premise was that they didn't die. To be honest, demons advanced very quickly, especially the low-grade ones. These demons killed each other, and as long as they survived, they could quickly advance. There was no specific conclusion as to how long a demon's lifespan was, but one thing was certain. So far, not a single demon had lived to the end of their lives. Sulan didn't plan to use this potion, but that didn't mean it was useless. For example, he could create a small villain boss for himself to gain experience. A mid-grade demon would give tens of thousands of experience. If he was lucky, he could directly level up. Sulan casually threw the potion into his storage space and left the laboratory. Hathaway was busy during this time. There were a lot of materials that she needed to deal with. It was not easy to make suitable magic equipment with the materials of 6 frost dragons. Monsignor, Mr. Xian has returned with the caravan. There are 2 centaur messengers and a team of centaur warriors. Just as Sulan was about to go to the training ground, a member of the security team hurried over to report. Take the team of centaur warriors to a residential area outside the town. Prepare some food for them and let them rest there. Be careful not to let anyone disturb them. Centaur messengers, take them to the guest hall. Let Chris take care of them on my behalf. I'll be there soon. Sulan immediately ordered someone to make the arrangements. After greeting Hathaway, Sulan rushed to the castle. After changing into a set of luxurious clothes, he went to see the centaur messengers. To be honest, although Sulan had been in this world for a long time, this was the first time he had seen centaurs. The 2 centaur messengers were a male and a female. They had human facial features and green hair. The female centaur had a beautiful braid with some gemstones hanging from it. Her facial features were also very delicate. The male centaur had a strong body and was at least 2.4 meters tall. The contours of his muscles were obvious. It was obvious that he was a powerful warrior. The 2 centaurs had elf-like pointed ears and golden eyes. It was said that this centaur tribe had a part of the bloodline of the Dryads. This could be seen from their ears. The 2 centaurs in front of him wore white linen robes. The hem of the robes was very wide. Half of the robes fell down their bodies while the other half was draped over their backs. The 2 centaurs were both maroon. Even from a human's point of view, they were very handsome and beautiful. Sulan felt a surge of elemental energy from the female centaur. It was different from the elemental energy of wizards. This energy had a dignified aura. Sulan guessed that the female centaur was most likely a priestess. The centaur tribe was very widespread. They also believed in different gods. Some believed in the god of storms, while others believed in the goddess of nature and Mother Earth. It was said that the earliest centaurs had a part of the bloodline of the gods. Just like the human world, centaurs also had nobles and commoners. Normal centaurs had average intelligence and bad tempers. They were not easy to get along with. However, the noble centaurs were very intelligent. They had a wealth of knowledge and also had a priestess. The 2 messengers in front of him were clearly centaur nobles. Chapter 129. When Sulan came back, he saw a group of centaur warriors. They were all equipped with spears and bows. They were tall and strong, and they were even stronger than the barbarians that Sulan saw the first time. It was clear that the centaur tribe valued Sulan very much. No, it should be said that they valued this trade very much. Chris had already arranged for people to prepare a sumptuous meal. Because it was noon, there were many fruits and all kinds of meat on the table. The chefs had also specially roasted a whole lamb with some cumin sprinkled on it. The smell of it was very appetizing. Sulan also asked people to prepare desserts and ice cream. He also prepared 2 bottles of high-quality rum. Because of the centaur's body structure, Sulan did not prepare chairs for them. Instead, he prepared thick and soft cushions. The two centaurs were very satisfied with this arrangement. "Hello, human lord. I am Mission from the Samar centaur tribe. This is my brother Cain." Sulan did not expect the centaur tribe's messenger to be led by Mission, a female centaur. Mission was very interested in this human lord. When she entered the town, she saw the ogre wizard's head and Cryopterus' head hanging on the city wall. The centaurs were very clear about the strength of the ogre tribe, and the Cryopterus' head made her turn pale with fright. The powerful Cryopterus had the ability to fly. Not many people in this wasteland were willing to provoke them. Now that their heads were hanging on the city wall, she had to be careful and respectful. "Sulan, lord of the northern castle," Sulan said with a smile. He then gestured to the prepared banquet hall and said, "I've prepared some things there. We can sit down and talk." Sulan had already noticed the small movements of the two centaurs. The centaur tribe's food was obviously not as good as the humans', let alone the food that was cooked by the halflings' chefs. Therefore, after smelling the aroma of the food, the glutton in his stomach began to stir. When they heard Sulan's invitation, they immediately agreed. When they arrived at the banquet hall, the two centaurs were very satisfied with the food prepared by Sulan. The fruits were okay since they were all gathered from the wilderness, but the fruit salad with cream and honey made them forget to leave. There was also a dessert called ice cream. It was simply delicious. That roasted antelope was also not bad. After tasting the food, Mission and Cain let go of their reservations and began to taste all kinds of food. "Lord Sulan, we are at war with the orc tribe in the north. We need a batch of weapons and food, and of course, wine." After finishing her meal, the beautiful mare finally remembered to talk about business. "That's not a problem. I can sell them all to you." Sulan nodded. These were originally prepared for trade. He put down the wine glass and continued, "But what are you going to use to trade?" In the wastelands, Kinnar was basically not used for trade. After all, orcs, half-orcs, barbarians, centaurs, and half-elves rarely used Kinnar. Most of the time, they used the ancient method of bartering. In fact, even human caravans that came to the wastelands to trade mostly used bartering. We can use longbows, horses, and furs to trade. Of course, we can also use some gold or silver. Mission put down the ice cream in his hand and said, "Gold and silver should be some raw ores. It seems like there are a lot of gold and silver mines in the wilderness." Sulan thought to himself, "We don't need gold or silver for now. You can use horses and longbows to trade." Sulan had already planned to form a cavalry and archer team. Although he didn't have a cavalry commander's seal and didn't have the system bonuses, forming a cavalry team was not a problem. "How many horses and longbows do you have?" Sulan asked. 200 fine horses and 100 longbows, Mission said. "We are going to trade for 200 sets of armor and 20 carriages of food. We also want 1 carriage of rum. 200 sets of armor, 20 carriages of food, and 1 carriage of rum. I have all these goods, but you don't have enough to trade." Sulan took a sip of his wine glass and said. The armor that the centaurs were talking about was not human armor. Due to their body structure, the centaurs' armor had to be specially made. They had to link a human half-armor with a horse's armor. This kind of armor was equivalent to the armor of a human heavy cavalry, so it would not be cheap. At the same time, food was very precious in the wilderness. 20 carriages of food was not a small number. The centaurs in front of them were asking for a sky-high price. "Our horses are the best. They can support heavy armor and charge. Our longbows are also the best. If these things are transported to the human world, they will be popular goods. We think this price is reasonable." Mission said with a smile. "You also know that it is to be transported to the human world. Su Len leaned back in his chair. The wine glass in his hand was shaking rhythmically. The amber wine swayed back and forth in the glass. But this is the wilderness. You are using the human world standards to set the price. You are being a hooligan. Su Len said with a smile. Miss Mission, I am very sincere about doing business with you, but I don't see any sincerity in you. Lord Su Len, how much do you think we should pay? Mihian wasn't surprised. She had always been in charge of trading with humans in the Samar tribe. Even if she was ignorant at first, she had been in contact with human merchants for a long time, so she had some negotiation skills. 300 horses and 300 bows, Su Len said directly. No, that's too much. 300 horses are fine, but not bows. Mission shook her head and refused. We are now at war with the orcs. We can only sell 100 bows. But we can sell you some slaves and gold. Don't you humans like gold? What slaves? How much gold are you willing to pay? Some orc captives. Mission continued. We can provide 200 orc laborers. They are much stronger than goblins, kobolds, and gnolls. Gold is 300 pounds according to your human standards. 100 pounds of gold. Su Len didn't expect the centaur tribe to be so rich. The level of smelting in this era was limited. The purity of gold was only about 91% of what it was in his previous world. A standard kinnar weighed about 5 grams. In addition to gold, there were also some other metals mixed in. 300 pounds of gold was equivalent to 30,000 kinnar. 200 orc laborers, 300 horses, 100 bows, and 300 pounds of gold. This is our first trade, so I will take a loss and agree. Su Len thought for a while and pretended to agree. Then I look forward to working with you. The beautiful little mare nodded excitedly. You are a good person. Looking at the little mare's innocent eyes, Su Len felt a little guilty. However, he quickly convinced himself. After all, the other people and the centaurs gave a much higher price. Compared to them, he was already very kind. Chapter 130. Both sides were very satisfied with this deal. After discussing the time and place of the deal, the atmosphere became very harmonious. The banquet became more and more lively. Frodo was very interested in the two centaurs. After Mission knew that the delicious food was Frodo's masterpiece, he very warmly invited Frodo to be a guest in the centaur tribe. However, Su Len stopped him. It wasn't easy to get a chef. How could he just let someone else take him away? After some discussion, Su Len also got some information about the centaur tribe and the orcs that were fighting against them. The Samar tribe had a population of more than 6,000, and more than 2,000 of them were warriors. The rest were women, children, the elderly, and the weak. Of course, this was only relative. In fact, the women of this tribe were also very strong. It could be said that every tribe was a soldier. If there was a crisis, the entire tribe would pick up their weapons. The centaur tribe also had priests. Su Len didn't know how many priests there were, but there were at least 3 of them. Compared to wizards, priests were more suitable for the battlefield. As long as they grasped the right timing, these priests with divine spells had the power to turn the tide of a battle. The armor that Su Len sold to the centaurs was not plate armor. After all, low-carbon steel armor was not cheap, and the centaur's body structure was not suitable for plate armor. Therefore, he sold them a type of chainmail. The blacksmith shop in Northtown Castle had a hydraulic forging machine, so it was very easy to make these iron armor leaves. These iron armor leaves were also twice as big as normal leaves, so it was even easier to make them. With a hammer strike, a piece of iron armor was produced. With the help of the blast furnace, they could make a few sets of iron armor in a day. After finishing all the food on the table, the 2 centaurs let out a satisfied burp. As a nomadic race, it was easy to imagine the diet of the centaurs. Most of the time, they would roast the food and sprinkle some salt on it, or add some wild vegetables to stew it. Sullen's food was all kinds of fried, steamed, and fried. There were also fruit salad and ice cream, which could be considered as luxurious desserts. It could be said that this was the best food they had ever eaten in their lives. After eating, Sulan began to talk with them. He wanted to get more information about this wasteland. "I heard that you were fighting against the orcs?" Sulan asked. "Yes, it's an orc tribe. They want to invade our territory," Mission said. "We have been at war with them for a long time, but with this batch of equipment, we are confident that we can drive them out of our pasture completely." "How strong are those orcs?" Sulan wanted to know the strength of the orcs. "Their strength is not bad. Their individual strength is weaker than ours, but they have more people, and they have shamans." Mihian's expression was serious when he talked about the shamans. Obviously, he valued them a lot. "Those bastards are using elemental power to destroy nature. This is blasphemy to Mother Earth," Mission said sternly. Suluan had a general understanding of the conflict between the two sides. Most likely, both sides had set their sights on a piece of grassland, but in the end, neither side was willing to back down. The orcs had taken the initiative by relying on their advantage in numbers, but the centaurs refused. Coupled with the fact that the two tribes had different doctrines, it was even more difficult for the two sides to get along. Even a small matter could cause a fight, let alone a large piece of grassland. This was related to the future development and strength of the tribe. With a larger pasture, they could raise more livestock and feed more people. In a place like the wilderness, if you wanted to survive, you had to fight. Fight for pasture, fight for territory, and fight for more living space. Through Mission, Sulan also learned some information about the surrounding wasteland. There was a troll tribe to the north of the centaur tribe. Following the Red Sand River to the south, there was a swamp where some lizard tribes lived. The centaurs did not know any further places. In fact, the centaurs told Sulan that the tribes were all big tribes. In this wasteland, there were many smaller tribes. There were too many tribes, and no one knew when they were annexed, so no one knew how many tribes there were. After sending the centaur tribe's messenger away, it was already evening. The two sides agreed to come back to trade after a while. Sulan also needed a few days to prepare the armor. After this trade, Sulan would have 300 war horses and 100 longbows. He could also put the cavalry and archers on the agenda. When he arrived at the barracks, the recruits were still training. 20 archers were training their arm strength, and 20 spearmen were stabbing the scarecrows with wooden spears. Sheriff Harrison was also training the security team's soldiers. "Harrison." Sulan waved at him. Harrison, who was in the middle of training, asked the squad leader to lead them to continue training, and then walked towards Sulan. "Monsignor, you were looking for me?" "Yes, the centaurs will send a batch of horses in a few days. Pick 30 horses for the security team and teach them how to ride," Sulan said. "Monsignor, don't worry. I will train them well." Harrison was very excited when he heard that he would be assigned 30 horses to the security team. Before this, the security team only had 2 horses, and they could only be used to send messages. Many times, they could not arrive in time to deal with emergencies. "By the way, recruit some people from the refugees and train a cavalry," Sulan continued. Although many of the heroes in the territory knew how to ride, Harrison was the only one who could train cavalry. He was also the only one who had served in the army of Florence and knew how to train cavalry. Of course, he only knew how to train some beginner cavalry. It was impossible to train elite cavalry or heavy cavalry. "Yes, Monsignor." Harrison saluted seriously. "Okay, continue with the training. As long as you make enough contributions, I will give you rewards. Money, land, or a title. Sulen patted Harrison's shoulder, and then continued to tour the camp. Harrison, who had received Sulen's promise, was overjoyed. He became even more excited, and then trained the soldiers even more fiercely. "Little bastards, did you not eat? You're so soft. Even those women are better than you. Tell me loudly, are you guys men?" "Yes." "Louder, I can't hear you." "Yes." Everyone roared. "Then train with all your heart." Harrison roared. "Look, this is what chopping is. Look at the bullsh *T you guys are training. Today, everyone will do 500 more chopping, and you're not allowed to eat if you don't finish." Seeing the soldiers being tortured by Harrison, Sulen smiled in his heart, and then left the camp. Chapter 131. Cavalry training was not something that could be done overnight. Other than horses, the cavalry also needed to be equipped with all sorts of equipment, such as horseshoes and saddles. These were just the basics. Light cavalry did not need to prepare horse armor, but heavy cavalry needed a full set of horse armor. However, Sulen did not plan to train heavy cavalry for the time being. He had a group of strong barbarian warriors who could replace the heavy cavalry to a certain extent. Currently, the territory lacked light cavalry. Light cavalry could be used to scout, harass, sneak attack, and send messages. The weather was getting colder. When he woke up in the morning, there was already frost on the windows. Just yesterday, Sulen met another wandering hero in the tavern, Hunter. This was a small leader of a caravan. He used to do business in various places, so he knew the price of various goods. He was also familiar with the operations of a caravan. When Sulen invited him to join the caravan, the small leader agreed without hesitation. He then went to terminate his employment with the manager of the caravan. Sulen appointed him as the tax collector of the northern castle. He was in charge of collecting taxes from the caravans that came and went. Previously, Chris and Xion were in charge of this. Now, Barnes was in charge. However, he still had to report to Chris every day. Name, Barnes, loyalty, 82 occupation, merchant tax collector level, 5 strength, 6 dexterity, 7 spirit, 6 vitality, 6 charm, 7 command, 20 characteristics, talent appraisal, observation, listening, actor, trading, glib tongue, decent manners, gossip, shrewd. Merchant, he used to be a merchant. He used to do business in various places for a long time. This allowed him to know the price of various goods and the tricks that merchants use to evade taxes. Tax +1, skills, proficient in mathematics, proficient in law, basic swordsmanship, information gathering, intimidation, hidden compartment searching weapon proficiency, swordsmanship 60, archery 75, equestrian 83 evaluation. This is a qualified tax officer. Any attempt to evade taxes will be detected by him. You will have to pay him a fee every month. With the addition of a tax officer, the tax collection in the territory was much clearer. Under Hunter's influence, those who tried to evade taxes were punished. The rate of tax evasion was greatly reduced. Sulen could already foresee that the tax collection in the northern castle would increase again. As a matter of fact, the structure of the officials in the North Fortress was not logical at all. There was no one in charge of the mayor, the chief of the guards, the garrison officer, or the steward of the fortress. Chris was actually in charge of the mayor and the castle steward. As for the guard captain and the garrison officer, Johnson and Boulder were temporarily in charge. In reality, the two of them were not qualified. There was also no one to be the diplomat of the territory. After all, the position of a diplomat was very important. To a certain extent, he was Sulen's spokesperson. Basically, all diplomats were born nobles. After all, this was an era of conflict between nobles. If you did not understand the etiquette and way of speaking, you would not be qualified to be a diplomat. Therefore, this position could only be left vacant. Perhaps he could train one himself in the future. Sulan had been instructing the slaves and vagabonds to build a stable for the past 2 days. The winter in the northern wastelands was still very cold. The warmth of the stable had to be kept up. Otherwise, when winter came, the horses would be easily frostbitten by the heavy snow. The stable was built in the southeast of the town. There was a large open space here. Sulan purposely brought a canal from the Red Sand River. He also selected 5 spearmen and 5 archers from the war spirits to be stationed here. Although there were only 10 of them, these war spirits were well coordinated and well equipped. They had no problem dealing with small groups of gnolls or bugbears. If a large group of them entered the territory, they would be discovered immediately. The barbarian guards in the territory would deal with them as soon as possible. The stable was built very quickly. Sulan purposely took the time to cast mud to stone on the stable and turned the walls of the stable into a rock structure. Soon, the stable was built. Stable, a place where the horses live and rest. A good resting environment can make the horses stronger. Clean and tidy +3, energy recovery +2, energetic +1, disease reduction +2, warm as spring +2. After the construction of the stable was completed, the centaurs who came to trade also arrived. Sulan ordered people to prepare 200 pieces of armor and 20 carriages for the trade, and then personally led them to the place agreed upon by the 2 sides. The camel beasts pulled the heavy carriages forward. More than 20 carriages formed a long line. Sulan and the barbarian guards were guarding by the side. There were also 30 war spirits next to them. It could be said that for this trade, Sulan had brought out most of the territory's power. He was not naive enough to think that he would directly send the goods to the centaurs because he had already agreed on the trade. There were no laws in the wilderness. Here, the power of the fist was the law. Persuasion was the law. If Sulan didn't prepare enough deterrents, even though the 2 sides communicated harmoniously that day, once a lot of interests were involved, he believed that the centaurs would absolutely not mind acting as bandits. 20 carriages of food and 200 sets of armor. Such a large amount of wealth was enough for the centaurs to take the risk. Don't think that they would care about credibility. The tribes in the wilderness rose and fell too quickly. They did not have the time nor the right to think about long-term development. Sulan would not use his goods to test the centaurs' credibility. There was an 80 to 90% chance that they would not be able to withstand the test. The location of the trade was a plain outside of Sulan's territory. The terrain here was open. As long as a few people stood on the nearby high ground, they could see everything within a few kilometers. There was no need to worry about being ambushed. Even if the centaurs charged, they would have enough time to surround the carts. Soon, a scout galloped over on a galloping horse and swiftly dismounted from his horse. "Monseigneur, I've already scouted the area. There are no ambushes around." "Scout again." Sulan nodded and said. The scout mounted his horse and galloped away again. The carts continued forward. After about an hour, the carts arrived at the agreed location. The centaurs also appeared on the other side. Sulan looked from afar and saw a black mass. Other than the war horses, there were at least 300 centaurs. On the other side, the centaurs who had just arrived also saw Sulan's carts. "Cain, is that the lord who made the trade with you? To think that they only brought so few people. Should we just eat them up?" A tall and muscular centaur with a naked upper body and scars all over his body came to Cain's side and asked in a low voice. "Cantor, don't attack first. The fact that these humans can stand in the wilderness means that they are not weak. But we can test them first," Cain said after some thought. "If they are not strong enough, you know what to do." "Understood. I'll go now." Although Cain had seen the ogre shaman's head and Cryopterus' head on the walls of Northgard Castle, he had never seen these humans in action. He was still doubtful. After all, these short humans were not as strong as the orcs. They also ran slower. Other than being good at farming, they had no other advantages. Chapter 132. Sulen stood at the front of the group and saw a dozen tall centaurs charging over. At first, Sulen thought they were here to trade, but after a while, he realized that they didn't seem to be slowing down at all. Although there were only a few centaurs, when they charged, they had the aura of an army of thousands of men and horses. "Boss, something's wrong." Johnson's face changed as he came over and said. "Looks like these centaurs have other ideas." Sulen sneered. "Hey, do they think they can do it?" Johnson spat in disdain and said eagerly, "Boss, why don't we just deal with them directly? They didn't all come. They probably want to test our strength. If we're strong enough, they'll pretend nothing happened. If we're not strong enough, these centaurs will swarm us." Sulen's tone was relaxed as he waved his hand. The war spirits behind him immediately stepped forward. 15 spearmen stood in a row, their sharp spears pointed upwards. The other 15 archers also stood in a row, their arrows stuck half a meter in front of them. Then, one by one, they knocked the arrows on their bows. 120 steps. Prepare to shoot 3 arrows. Shoot. Bang. With Su Luan's order, the 15 archers instantly released the bowstrings, and 15 sharp arrows flew out in an instant. Then these archers did not stop at all. Their hands were like phantoms as they shot 3 arrows in succession. The 3 consecutive waves of arrows crossed the distance of 120 steps in an instant and then nailed into the ground. Cantor led the 50 centaurs and charged towards the caravan. Very quickly, 2 groups of soldiers came out from the caravan. Looking at the thin formation of the soldiers, Cantor couldn't help but sneer. Such a thin formation wanted to stop the charge of the centaurs. But when he looked up, he saw a row of arrows flying at him. Cantor's face changed. He leaned back and his hooves rubbed against the ground. As soon as he stopped, there were 3 rows of arrows in front of him. The closest one was less than half a meter away from him. Looking at the arrows that were half buried in the ground, Cantor felt cold sweat. This level of accuracy and strength was not inferior to the archers in their clan. Moreover, their discipline was even better. Cantor hesitated for a moment and decided to give up on probing the enemy's strength. It was clear that although there weren't many humans, they weren't characters that could be easily manipulated. Cantor did not continue to charge. He slowed down and continued to move forward, bypassing the arrows. It didn't take long for Cantor to arrive in front of the human convoy. After what he had just experienced, he no longer dared to underestimate these humans. When he got closer, he discovered that there was a group of barbarian warriors armed to the teeth. After seeing these barbarians clearly, Cantor was secretly shocked. Although these barbarians looked carefree, the aura of their leader was something he had only felt from the Grand Patriarch. No, it seemed to be even stronger than the Grand Patriarch's aura. But how was this possible? How could such powerful barbarian warriors be under the command of such an ordinary-looking human lord? While Cantor was still thinking, Su Luan asked, "Are you the one in charge of the Centaur tribe's trade?" "I am Cantor. I am responsible for inspecting the goods. Hunter is in charge of the trade. As long as the goods are up to standard, we can proceed with the trade." Cantor looked at the shining armor with a burning passion. Sulen looked at the centaur and said to Johnson, "Of course you can inspect the goods. But you can't just look at ours. Johnson, take a group and see if their goods are up to standard." "Understood, boss." Johnson grinned at Cantor and called a dozen barbarians over to the centaurs not far away. The trade went smoothly. Sulen simply showed off his muscles to let the centaurs know how strong he was, and they obediently carried out the trade. In addition to 300 horses, 100 longbows, 300 pounds of gold, and 200 orc slaves, These orcs looked ugly. They had gray skin and coarse hair. They had hunched backs, low foreheads, and faces that looked like pig faces. Their lower canine teeth were protruding like elephant tusks. These orcs were about 1.8 meters tall. Their clothes were tattered, and there were many crisscrossing whip marks on their skin. As for the cat-eared girls that Su Len wanted, they had nothing to do with the orcs. He also learned from Hathaway that the cat-eared girls were actually were-creatures. It was said that these were-creatures came from some dark human experiments during the Arcane Empire in the last era. When the Arcane Empire was destroyed, the were-creatures were freed. In the beginning, the bloodline of the were-creatures was not very stable. There were often occurrences of atavism or collapse. It was not until many generations later that the were-creatures were formed. The were-creatures had a strong talent in some aspects, but they also had obvious shortcomings in some areas. In fact, the were-creatures were just a kind of failed product of the arcanists of the Arcane Empire. However, after thousands of years of reproduction, the bloodline of the were-creatures had stabilized. The wizards of this world had actually obtained part of the knowledge of the Arcane Kingdom. It was said that the legendary and incomparably glorious Arcane Kingdom was not the original inhabitants of this world, but a group of outsiders. They were conquerors from other worlds, and the original human heroes of this world were probably the servants of those conquerors. This was also the reason why the human heroes at the end of the last era were so powerful. Of course, the nobles scoffed at such a theory and sealed it off completely. All of the books were destroyed and burned, and only the Magi who had been around for a long time left behind some incomplete information. The nobles claimed that the human heroes were inspired by the gods or blessed by the ancient elves. Then, they became heroes. It was also the gods who asked them to lead humans from darkness to civilization. In Sullen's view, the wizard's statement was actually more credible. Of course, the nobles would be stupid if they admitted it. It was like throwing their noble aura directly into a cesspool and then stepping on it. As a noble, Su Len had vested interests. Even he would make the same choice as the nobles. Su Len looked at the were-creatures. These were-creatures looked at the centaurs and humans with hatred, but he did not care. Northgard Castle had enough strength to suppress them. Chapter 133. After a while, the two sides finally completed the trade. The centaurs were very satisfied with the armor provided by the North Fortress. Many of them put on the armor right away. After the transaction was completed, Su Luan's team became more powerful. The 300 horses were mighty. Fortunately, these horses had been trained, and only a few people were needed to control these horses to keep up. It took them much less time to go back than when they came. The 20 carriages were almost empty. After returning to the Northtown Castle, Su Luan arranged the war horses and then took out a centaur longbow to try. The centaur longbow was longer than the average human bow. It was about 1.5 meters long. In fact, this type of bow was not suitable for cavalry. The length of the bow was too long, and it was very inconvenient to ride on a horse. Very few human cavalry bows were longer than 1 meter. Only the centaurs with their special physique could use this type of longbow. The range of a normal cavalry bow and a centaur longbow was about a third or even more. Su Len bought these centaur longbows for cavalry. From this, it was clear that the centaur light cavalry could easily defeat the human light cavalry. They could even kite the human light cavalry to death. That was the advantage of their race. The centaur longbow was made of purple fir wood. The body of the bow was very smooth. Because it was a weapon used by centaurs, it required a lot of strength to draw the bow. Without professional training, it was impossible to control it. Centaur longbow, hard bow, made with purple fir wood as the main material. This is an excellent centaur longbow. It took the centaur craftsman 3 years to complete it. It has a tenacity and range that far surpasses ordinary bows. However, to use it, one must have great strength, range, and power. Range +1, armor penetration +1, strength requirement, 10. Su Lan came to the shooting range and stood about 120 meters away from the target. He picked up an arrow, nocked it, aimed at the target, and shot. Dong! A sharp arrow sank into the bull's eye. Su Lan did not stop. He picked up the arrow stuck in the ground and shot at the target in front of him. Dong dong dong. Translator, WQL editor, Alim Su Lan shot out 5 consecutive arrows. With the speed of more than 100 arrows, Su Lan was already very good at archery. Therefore, it was not difficult for him to shoot consecutive arrows. It only took him a few seconds to shoot out the first arrow to the 5th arrow. Su Lan didn't stop. He grabbed the arrows and shot continuously. There were 30 arrows in one quiver, and Su Lan used only half a minute to shoot all of them. All the arrows on the row of targets in the distance hit the bullseye. After a series of tests, these centaur longbows had an effective range of 1/4 to 1/5 longer than the best walking bows used by humans, and 1/3 longer range than riding bows. The centaur longbow had a maximum range of 330 meters and an effective range of 200 meters. The best range was around 120 meters. At this range, the arrows would have a high penetrative power. Only Sulan's iron body bow was better than the centaur longbow in Northgard Castle. The longbows used by the war spirits had the same range as the centaur longbow. This kind of arrow could easily penetrate ordinary armor at a distance of 120 meters. Only armor made of steel could withstand this kind of arrow. Of course, the weakness of the centaur longbow was obvious. It required a lot of strength to draw these longbows. Normal people could not use them at all. They could only learn to use them after some professional training. The new archers in the camp could not use these bows yet. They could only use them when they leveled up. If they wanted to use them flexibly, they would have to level up to become elite longbowmen. Even so, the number of times they could shoot with these bows would be reduced. It might be difficult for others to find enough archers, but for Su Lan, it was just a matter of time. After 3 to 6 months of training, the refugees would become qualified recruits. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that they were physically weak, their recruit training would have ended in 3 months. After that, they would follow the barbarian guards to patrol the territory. After a few more battles, they would be promoted to longbowmen or elite longbowmen. After understanding the power of the centaur longbow, Su Lan had a clear understanding of the strength of the centaurs. If Su Lan encountered a group of centaur longbow when he first opened up his territory, there was a 90% chance that his barbarian warriors would be wiped out. These centaurs ran faster than the barbarians, and their arrows were more accurate. As long as the barbarians did not have a chance to get close, the barbarians would be easy targets. If Sulan's territory had 1,000 elite longbowmen, even if there were 10 times the number of barbarians attacking the city, these longbowmen would be enough to wipe out the enemy. After understanding the strength of the centaur longbow, Su Lan decided to expand his archer team. Of course, if he wanted to form a large archer team, he would need to increase the population. Although Northgard Castle had found many ways to increase its population, it still had less than 3,000 people. As time passed, the northern wastelands entered winter. When he woke up in the morning, he could see the white frost on the roof. When he went out, his breath was already white. Northgard Castle's winter came a month earlier than the other provinces in the south. After this month, it would start snowing in the northern wastelands. By then, the roads would be blocked by heavy snow, and the trade route between Northgard Castle and Cult City would be interrupted. Therefore, if Su Lan wanted to increase his population quickly, there was only 1 month left. After that, it would be 3 months of winter. Not long ago, Su Lan had obtained 300 pounds of gold from the centaur tribe's trade. The gold could be cast into Kinnar at least 30,000 pieces. If he was greedy enough to mix in some other metals, it would not be a problem to cast an additional 10,000 pieces. After all, even the official kinnar cast by the Kingdom of Florence was mixed with other metals. He planned to let Xian go to Cult City to buy a large number of slaves in the last month. Apart from buying serfs, Sulan also planned to buy slaves with various skills. After arranging a team of 20 war spirits and a team of barbarian warriors, Sulan asked Boulder to bring 15,000 pieces of kinnar and follow Xian to Cult City. After arranging the caravan, Sulan began to think about the drows. It was already winter, and the drows had not experienced the cold winter in the northern wastelands. He wanted to recruit the drows, and this was a good opportunity. Chapter 134. Sulan decided to support the Centaur tribe. After all, if the Centaur tribe lost, the Orc tribe would take over their territory. Sulan's territory directly bordered the Orc tribe. He didn't want to fight against an Orc tribe with tens of thousands of people at this time. Maybe he would wait for another 2 years, when he had enough soldiers, and then he would fight against these big tribes. Orcs and humans were also enemies. In the past, it was humans who worked with the dwarves and elves to drive the orcs to those areas with bad environments. Over the years, the orcs all over the continent never gave up and returned to those rich lands. If Sulan's territory bordered the orcs, they would definitely attack his territory. But now that the Centaur tribe was in front of him, Sulan's territory could develop in peace. Sulan used the gold he got from trading with the centaurs to make coins. He mixed some copper and other metals into the 300 pounds of gold. Sulan even built a coin workshop for this purpose. The workshop wasn't big, but Sulan let Chris manage it to make sure the workers didn't embezzle anything. With a succubus who was an expert at manipulating people, Sulan didn't have to worry about the workers embezzling his money. In addition to the gold coins, the coin workshop also minted copper and silver coins. Gold coins were used for large-scale trade and were rarely circulated in the hands of commoners. Silver and copper coins were the main currency in circulation. With the development of the Northgard Castle, Sulan clearly noticed that the amount of money in his territory was a little insufficient. In fact, there was no other way. The number of freemen in Sulan's territory was too small. Most of them were his serfs, so there was no need for currency circulation at all. It was also because of the trade caravan that the number of freemen began to increase. Coupled with the increase in the number of refugees, all kinds of products were abundant, and the circulation of materials in the territory gradually increased. Due to the shortage of copper and silver nars, Northtown Castle had to barter most of the time, which made it difficult to set a price for the goods. What's more, it was very inconvenient to trade. Therefore, Sulan began to make copper and silver nars after noticing this. There were many types of currency in this world, and there was no unified currency. The exchange rate between countries was also different. It was very troublesome for merchants from different countries to exchange currencies. If they didn't clearly state which currency they were using during the transaction, it was very likely that they would be cheated. Therefore, those merchants who did international trade were very familiar with the currencies of various countries. It was not easy to become an international merchant. Even in modern society, there were counterfeit currencies. Naturally, there were counterfeit currencies in this era as well. For example, brass was used to pass off as gold. In fact, what was more troublesome was the inferior currency. Originally, the difference in gold content between different countries was already a headache. However, there were also some privately minted gold coins. Most of these privately minted gold coins were lower in gold content than the original currency. Naturally, it was more difficult to settle the transaction. The Kingdom of Florence used a kinnar, silver, and copper exchange rate. 1 kinnar could be exchanged for 20 silver nars, and 1 silver nar could be exchanged for 20 copper nars. Although it was a little troublesome, it was still acceptable. However, the exchange rate of some countries made people want to kill the people who set the exchange rate. For example, the desert kingdom northwest of Florence used a gold coin for 12 silver nars, and 1 silver nars for 20 copper nars. People who were not good at math would make mistakes when shopping on the street. There was also the exchange rate in the hexadecimal system, which was even more frustrating. In fact, the goddess of wealth in this world issued a standard gold coin. However, these gold coins were mostly circulated in the south of the continent and in the areas where sea trade was popular. The exchange rate of the goddess of wealth's gold coins was decimal. There was no temple of the goddess of wealth in the kingdom of Florence yet. Of course, Su Luan was not stupid enough to use this method of exchange. If he was not worried that those merchants would not accept it, he would directly change the ratio of gold NR to silver NR to copper NR to 10. The simpler the exchange rate, the more convenient it was for ordinary people to use. In order to make the circulation of goods in the territory smoother and more prosperous, Su Luan directly asked the craftsman to make 100,000 copper nars. It just so happened that he obtained a lot of bronze weapons when he wiped out the gnolls and kobolds. These things could be used to make coins. At the same time, he also made 10,000 nars. These coins would be distributed to the refugees as remuneration for their labor. In fact, the coinage industry was very profitable. After all, the gold and silver content in gold and silver coins were not pure. Hathaway had already finished making the leather armor and cloaks made of the Stormwind tiger's skin. The 5 scouts each received a cloak, and the remaining one was given to the captain of the archers in the war spirits. The 12 leather armor were rewarded to the barbarians. With these cloaks, the scouts' detection ability and survival ability were greatly improved. Camouflage allowed them to scout closer, and haste and featherfall allowed them to escape faster. The barbarians who received the leather armor put it on under their iron armor. This way, not only could they use the enchantment effect of the leather armor, but they could also gain the defense of the iron armor. With haste and the barbarians' charging ability, the speed of the barbarians was already faster than that of a horse. If they were to face the centaurs now, with the speed of the barbarians, they would be able to catch up with them easily. In close combat, the centaurs were not a match for the barbarians at all. Not to mention, the 12 barbarians had already leveled up to the peak of their profession, great axe berserkers. Su Luan had always been vigilant against the centaurs. In this wasteland, even the humans could not be trusted too much. What if one day, the centaurs and the orcs suddenly reconciled, and both sides turned against him? The barbarian warriors who got the new equipment were very proud and arrogant. Sometimes Su Luan couldn't help but want to kick them. After driving the barbarians out to patrol, Su Luan went to the incubation room to check on the Cryopterus eggs. Ever since the Cryopterus eggs began to hatch, Su Luan would come here every day to check. At the same time, he would also replenish the Cryopterus eggs with ice elemental stones. After a period of incubation, the inside of the incubation room had changed greatly. The 150 square meter incubation room had turned into a world of ice and snow, which was the best environment for Cryopterus to hatch. Chapter 135. The ice elemental energy in the incubation room was very dense. A bone-piercing chill could be felt as soon as he stepped into the room. Su Luan picked up the depleted cold moon stone and replaced it with a new one. This kind of low-level ice elemental crystal cost 30 kinnar. Basically, one cold moon stone could be used for 2 days. If he wanted to hatch these Cryopterus, just the cold moon stone alone would cost him more than 1,000 kinnar. After replacing the new cold moon stone, Su Luan checked the 13 Cryopterus eggs in the incubation room. There was nothing wrong with the 13 dragon eggs. The life force and ice elemental energy in the eggs were slowly increasing. This meant that these eggs were in a normal state of development. If the life force in these winged dragon eggs weakened or stagnated, it meant that these winged dragon eggs were most likely dead. Some skilled hatcheries might have a chance to save these eggs, but Sulan could only watch. After checking the winged dragon eggs, Sulan stood up and left the room. After telling the two barbarian warriors to guard the eggs carefully, Sulan continued to patrol the other parts of the camp. The sugar refinery was right next to the Lord's castle. The sugar produced by the refinery was the biggest source of income for the northern fortress. However, the sugar trade had ended this year. As a matter of fact, the wild sugar beets collected by the northern fortress were almost used up. The territory controlled by the northern fortress now had a diameter of 20 kilometers. The areas close to the northern fortress had been cleaned up. If they wanted to dig up more beets, they would have to look further. Beets were not weeds that could be found everywhere. During this time, the teams that went out to dig for beets were getting less and less. In order to accumulate enough raw materials, Sulan had sent out more than 20 teams of 600 people. The sugar workshop could produce 20 pounds of sugar a day. It could produce 600 pounds of sugar a month. Other than sugar, there was also a lot of waste honey and beet residue. The waste honey was sent to the brewery on the other side to make rum, and the residue was used to make silage. The Northgard Castle had raised over 100 bison and even more spotted antelope and giant antler deer. They consumed a lot of vegetables every day. One of the most important tasks in the territory was to store the food. Many of the slaves bought from Cult City were proficient in breeding. Although they had never reared spotted antelopes, buffaloes, and giant antler deer before, after a few months, they were familiar with their habits. After the harvest of the territory, in addition to harvesting potatoes, the leaves and vines were also chopped up to become their food. It could be said that Sulan's territory had formed a simple industrial chain that connected all the resources in the territory. Beets could be used to extract sugar, and the remaining honey could be used to make wine. Beet dregs could be used to feed livestock, and the manure of livestock could be fermented and used to fertilize the fields. Thus, a somewhat crude industrial chain was established. As long as the Northgard fortress didn't make any mistakes or get attacked by the monsters in the wilderness, the place would continue to prosper. After inspecting the workshops and farms, Sulan went to the smithy. There was a blast furnace near the smithy. One could see it from afar. Because of the technology, the blast furnace couldn't produce steel every time. After all, Sulan's knowledge was limited. He could only rely on the blacksmiths to figure it out. Sulan came here to forge a new weapon. After becoming a legendary, his spear was no longer suitable for him. The dwarves and elves were the best blacksmiths in the world. Both races had mastered the forging method of low-carbon steel and carboizing steel. Weapons made with carboizing steel were naturally +2 even if they weren't enchanted. Bruce was the best blacksmith in the Northgard Castle. Sulan was going to customize a new weapon and ask Hathaway to enchant it. There were very few blacksmiths with superb skills, and even fewer who could forge legendary weapons. In order to forge a legendary weapon, one would need to have superb blacksmithing skills, some extraordinary materials, a skilled alchemist, and a bit of luck. Only then would one be able to forge a legendary weapon. Although Bruce's skills were good, he wasn't a master yet. Hathaway was only an intermediate alchemist. Alchemists needed to constantly experiment and accumulate experience before they could level up. In other words, they needed a lot of materials. It was impossible to forge a legendary weapon with such a lineup. Unless the goddess of luck was smiling at you. Sulan was going to forge an advanced magic weapon. Bruce, you can forge rare weapons now, right? Sulan came to the smithy and asked. If I have the materials, I'm 80% sure. But I don't know alchemy, so I can't enchant it, Bruce said as he wiped the sweat off his face. You don't have to worry about the enchantment. I'll find someone to do it. Sulan waved his hand and said, I have a weapon blueprint here. See if you can make it. Sulan spent 1,000 kinnur to buy a blueprint for the purple dragon halberd from the system store. He also bought meteor iron, tungsten steel, and amethyst to forge the weapon. The set of materials cost him 5,000 kinnar. The weapons in this world were divided into normal weapons, rare weapons, and legendary weapons. Normal weapons didn't have any bonuses and were considered common weapons. Rare weapons were also called magic weapons. The lowest grade was +1 enchantment or +1 enhancement. For example, the battle axes used by the barbarians were +1 sharpness. Experienced blacksmiths would occasionally forge them. They were considered excellent weapons and were much more expensive than normal weapons. The centaur longbow that Su Len bought last time was +2 equipment. These equipment were also called low-level magic items. As 4+3 weapons, Sulen's iron body bow was 1. It was a medium-level magic equipment. Su Len was preparing to forge the purple dragon halberd. If he succeeded, it would be a +4 high-level magic equipment. The lowest grade of legendary weapons was +5. As for the legendary weapons, Su Len hadn't seen them before, but he guessed that they would be +7 or +8 at least. After getting the materials, Bruce prepared to forge. But first, he picked up the blueprint for the purple dragon halberd and looked at it. The purple dragon halberd was a half-moon halberd. In fact, there were even more powerful weapon blueprints in the system store. For example, the sky halberd, dragon's courage spear, ghost god's sky halberd, and so on. However, the lowest grade of these weapons was legendary. The required materials weren't sold in the system store, and there weren't any master blacksmiths to make them. So, in the end, he chose to forge the purple dragon halberd. P.S. I'm really not her disciple. The main character, Ishan, apprenticed to the number 1 fairy, by Zyru. The author is a serious person who never steps on the brakes. Chapter 136. After Su Len prepared the materials, Bruce began to work. He needed to refine the materials first. Most rare weapons were made with the 100-fold forging technique. Some skilled blacksmiths could create cloud patterns while forging the weapons. The steel made with this technique was called cloud pattern steel. Su Len prepared meteor iron, tungsten steel, and amethyst. They were all rare materials. It was not easy to merge them perfectly. Bruce called all of his apprentices over. There weren't many opportunities for them to observe the forging of high-grade rare weapons at such a close distance. It would be very helpful for them to master more advanced skills. The furnace was burning fiercely. Under the urging of the hydraulic blower, the temperature in the furnace was getting hotter and hotter. Standing in the blacksmith's shop, waves of heat waves assaulted their faces. Putting the materials in the furnace and adding all kinds of accelerants, the furnace's temperature soon rose again. The materials in the furnace soon turned red and softened. Then, he took them out and began to hit them. Sparks flew everywhere, and a rhythmic sound was heard. Su Len did not wait for Bruce to forge weapons. Instead, he went to inspect other places in the territory. After more than a month, the first batch of bricks was finally done. The foundation of the outer city wall of the North Castle had been built. Now that there were bricks, the progress could be sped up. In fact, other than bricks, the outer city walls of the North Town Castle were also made of slag. Every month, the blast furnace in the blacksmith's shop would produce a lot of slag when it was producing iron ore. The slag was very hard, so it was very suitable to build the city walls with some adhesive materials. Because the outer city wall was too big, if he built it with rammed earth and then converted it with mud to stone, he would not be able to convert much of it with his current mana. Mud to stone could convert earth into stone. The more he converted, the more mana he would need. The outer city wall was at least 4 kilometers long. Each section was 10 meters high and 6 meters wide. Su Len could not change much at a time, but after using the masonry structure, he only needed to transform the cement between the masonry into rock with mud to rock, and the magic power consumption was reduced at once. Of course, it would take longer, but the advantage was that Sulan didn't have to stay at the construction site all day long. The beastman laborers from the Centaur tribe were also arranged here. With these strong beastman laborers, the construction of the city walls sped up a lot. Because there was nothing urgent, Sulan had been very relaxed these 2 days. Chris had taken care of most of the things, and he only needed to confirm the rest. Master, these are the coins that were just produced by the coin workshop. While Sulan was hiding in the study and watching attendant Chin, Chris came in with a delicate box. Throwing the book aside, Sulan stretched and hugged Chris in his arms. He sat down on the chair again and buried his head in her broad chest. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the box and checked it. Chris had long known Sulan's preferences, so she wasn't surprised by his sudden attack. "Are these the coins they made?" Sulan said as he played with a few coins. There were 6 coins in the box, 2 gold, 2 silver and 2 copper coins. Sulan picked up a copper coin, which was the smallest value. The copper coin was slightly green and had a good texture. Compared to the copper coin that was circulating next to it, it was better in terms of appearance and quality. Next, Sulan checked the other coins. The silver content of the silver coins was the same as the silver coins circulating in the kingdom, 80% silver and 20% other metals. The same was true for the gold coins. Sulan did not intend to make a large number of inferior coins in his territory. The consequence of this was that the people did not trust coins and resisted the use of coins. They would still use the barter method, which was completely contrary to his original intention. In the Kingdom of Florence, many nobles with real power would privately make coins. Although those nobles who made inferior coins would earn a lot of money in the beginning, it wouldn't take long for the trade in their territory to wither quickly. No merchants would trade with them. A gold dinar was 80% gold, but its face value was pure gold. Sulan had made 20% of his profit from the coinage alone. He didn't intend to make inferior coins like killing the goose that laid the golden eggs, such as white sugar and liquor, which were in high demand. Make the coins according to these. After checking it again, Sulan decided on the style of the coins. "Okay, I'll ask them to start making them in large quantities." Chris got out of Sulan's arms lightly, then gave him a flirtatious wink and ran away with a smile. Sulan tidied up his tight clothes and left the study. The blacksmith shop was bustling with activity, and the clanging sounds were very rhythmic. Bruce's eyes were bloodshot, and his bare chest was dripping with sweat. His skin was red from the heat of the furnace, but his expression was very excited, and he was directing the many apprentices to get busy. There were all kinds of rare materials beside him. Forging extraordinary weapons didn't mean that all the materials had to be extraordinary materials. Many of the auxiliary materials were just some rare minerals. Forging didn't directly mix all the materials together. If it was done this way, there was no other possibility other than wasting materials. The forging process in this world was still very magical. During the forging process, various catalysts or some strange things would be added. The purple dragon halberd used some Cryopterus blood to quench it during the forging process. The weapon was originally red, but after entering Cryopterus blood, it quickly cooled down. A burst of ice element energy instantly even lowered the temperature in the originally stuffy blacksmith shop by dozens of degrees. After the second quenching, Bruce heated up the metal again and hammered it again. The hammering was very rhythmic, and it seemed to have an indescribable charm. After hammering for a while, the metal was heated up again and some new materials were added. Under this repeated hammering, the metal became more compact. Strange patterns were faintly discernible during the forging process. All kinds of rare materials were added one after another. The meteor iron and tungsten steel had long been fused into one, and now a new kind of alloy was formed. Bruce was completely immersed in the forging process. This was a very rare opportunity for a skilled blacksmith. In this state, the blacksmith's skills would be greatly improved. If the forging process was successful, then Bruce's craftsmanship would improve tremendously. If he was lucky, it wouldn't be impossible for him to become a blacksmith master. Sulan didn't disturb Bruce, who was immersed in this special state. He also drove the apprentices who were about to wake him up to watch, leaving only 2 people to assist him. The clanging sound seemed to converge into a piece of music at this moment. The purple dragon halberd was also slowly taking shape in this state. Chapter 137. It was not easy to create a high-grade rare weapon. Without enchantment, the blacksmith master's work was the limit. Any higher would require magic enchantment. Magic enchantment was a very magical thing. It had the ability to turn something rotten into something magical. It could add some magical power to the weapon. There were many monsters and powerful creatures in this world. Ordinary weapons could not hurt them. For example, a real dragon. Ordinary weapons could not leave a mark on the scales of a real dragon. There were also some elemental creatures. Ordinary weapons were also ineffective. Take the fire elemental elder for example. Ordinary weapons would turn into molten iron as soon as they got close. Only rare weapons could hurt them. Bruce's eyes became more and more bloodshot, and his spirit became more and more excited. Sulan was worried that his body could not take it, so he asked Hathaway to make him an energy potion and a strength potion. Although Bruce's blacksmith skills were extraordinary, his strength was not strong. He was only a low-grade warrior. Continuous high-intensity work without sleep for several days was likely to cause serious damage to his body. Maybe after he finished forging the weapon, he would exit that strange state and become a cripple. He did not want a blacksmith master to become a cripple. Soon, 5 days had passed. Bruce did not sleep for 5 days. Although he had the potions provided by Hathaway, he still looked thinner. However, he still looked excited. The blacksmith apprentices had already taken turns to help here. Even so, these blacksmith apprentices looked a little dispirited. Sulan came here every day to check. Finally, on the 6th day, Bruce's face showed a trace of satisfaction. Clang! The hammer fell. A single-sided crescent halberd covered with cloud patterns and shimmering with purple light appeared on the workbench. The halberd's body was simple. There were only some decorations like fish scales, which were used to prevent slippage. The crescent blade on it had been sharpened. The cloud patterns around it made it look very mysterious. Su Luan took a look at it and fell in love with it at once. He reached out and grabbed it. The weight was just right. Su Luan skillfully brandished the spear and directly hacked at the black iron stone used to test his saber. Whoosh! A section of the black iron stone was directly cut off. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. This kind of black iron stone was used to test the saber and was extremely hard. Ordinary sabers and swords would only be able to leave a shallow mark on it, but this purple dragon halberd was actually able to easily cut through it. Sulan held the halberd horizontally and looked at the crescent blade. He saw that there were no marks or gaps on the blade. It was still shining with cold light. Sulan looked at the purple dragon halberd in his hand with satisfaction. This weapon could be said to be the strongest weapon he had ever seen. Phew, I'm finally done. I'm too tired. I'll take a nap first. I'll take a nap. After Bruce finished forging, a strong sense of fatigue suddenly hit him. His whole body was sore and his eyelids were so heavy that he couldn't open them at all. As soon as he finished speaking, his body swayed and fell backward. Fortunately, Sullen's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He caught Bruce, and the 2 blacksmith apprentices beside him quickly went forward to support him. Sulan thought that this guy was exhausted. After hearing the snoring sound and finding that Bruce was just overly tired, he was relieved and let the 2 blacksmith apprentices take him back to rest. Purple Dragon Halberd, type, spear weapon, unenchanted, +3 item grade, middle rank magic item. It is a powerful weapon made with forged steel, meteor iron, tungsten steel, and purple crystal as raw materials. It is quenched with the blood of Cryopteris. Requirements: Strength 14 or above. Additional effect: Sharpness +3, Toughness +3, Armor Penetration +2. Looking at the attributes of this weapon, Sullen's expression was also very surprised. This weapon had reached the limit of a middle-rank magic item. However, this weapon itself did not have any elemental damage. Of course, its additional sharpness and armor penetration were already very strong. Level 3 sharpness and level 2 armor penetration. Even steel plate armor could be easily broken by this weapon. This weapon was not completed yet. Su Lin left the blacksmith shop with the purple dragon halberd and walked towards Hathaway's laboratory. Whether this weapon could become a high-rank magic item or not depended on the enchantment effect of Hathaway. After arriving at Hathaway's alchemy laboratory and telling Hathaway the requirements of the weapon enchantment, Su Lin put down the weapon and left. This kind of high-rank enchantment could not have the slightest mistake. Su Lin naturally could not stay here. If there was a problem and caused the enchantment to fail, the power of this weapon would be greatly reduced. At that time, even Bruce might not be able to forge such a peak middle-rank weapon again. After coming out of the laboratory, Su Lin suddenly felt a little cold on his face. He looked up and saw snow falling from the sky. It was snowing in the northern wasteland. Su Lin stood on the balcony of the castle and looked at the sky outside. At this time, it was already snowing heavily. The caravan led by Xian had been gone for more than half a month. At this time, they should be on their way back. However, they encountered this heavy snow, so the time of their return would probably be delayed. He was not worried about the safety of the caravan. He was worried about the slaves that he bought this time. If the snow was too heavy and Xian did not prepare enough cotton-padded clothes, many of the slaves would definitely freeze to death. The territory's population was not enough to begin with. He did not want to lose any more people. Have the winter supplies in the city been distributed? Su Lin asked casually. According to your instructions, it has been distributed, Chris said. I've already made sure that everyone has cotton-padded clothes. At the same time, every household has been given charcoal to warm themselves. Moreover, the houses we built have good insulation. This winter, no one will freeze to death. Xian will definitely bring back a large number of slaves. Have their living quarters and cotton-padded clothes been prepared? I've prepared for 3,000 people, Chris said. That's not enough. Double the number. The winter in the northern wasteland is very cold. Those refugees who can't survive will not give up any chance to live. When the time comes, there will be a lot of people. Xian had brought 15,000 gold nars with him this time. A slave of the lowest grade would cost around 2 gold nars, while a slave with a certain skill would cost between 50 to 100 gold nars. He must have bought a lot of slaves this time. I'll have someone arrange it. Chris nodded and prepared to leave. However, at this time, a series of hurried footsteps came from the corridor, followed by a knock on the door. Come in, Chris said. Monsignor, there's an urgent military report. A man dressed as a scout walked in and said. Sullen's heart tightened. The scouts he sent out had been investigating the movements outside the territory. It seemed that another tribe was about to make a move. Chapter 138. The trolls were coming. Skinny Monkey had just told him that some trolls were moving towards the Northgard castle. The trolls were quite powerful in the wastelands. It was said that they once had a huge empire, but they lost the war with the ancient elves. In the end, the empire fell apart, and all the trolls were expelled to the wastelands. Su Lin knew how troublesome the trolls were. They used to have their own civilization. Although they were defeated by the elves, the the trolls' tribes were not to be underestimated. The trolls were living in tribes now. They thought that the empire had fallen, and all the trolls were running their own tribes. After being banished to the wildlands, the trolls' civilization had changed a lot. For example, the trolls had started to worship ancestor souls and natural spirits. Although the ancestor souls and natural spirits were not gods, they had some of the power of gods. The trolls could use them to cast elemental powers. Many of the trolls were first-class warriors, hunters, and assassins. They were very dangerous, especially since many of the trolls were good at using poison. The trolls' poison was very strong. Even the ogres could not withstand it. Now, the trolls were approaching the Northgard castle. Why are the trolls moving towards us? Sulen was confused. Although the trolls' tribe was not far from the Northgard castle, why would they attack humans? The trolls' enemies were the elves and half-elves. Even if they were going to attack, why would they choose to attack in the winter? Food. The trolls don't have enough food. That was the only explanation Sulen could think of. The trolls did not know how to farm. They were nomads. They relied on hunting and raising livestock. This was a very fragile way. Once there was a natural disaster, they would run out of food. If there was not enough food, the trolls would rob other tribes. The trolls' tribe near the Northgard castle was not very big. There were less than 1,000 trolls. Although the trolls weren't as numerous as the centaurs and orcs, they were still a very difficult race to deal with. The trolls had a very disgusting innate ability to regenerate. Their regenerative ability was simply perverted. Even if their arms or legs were broken, they would grow back in a few days. If they wanted to kill them, other than using fire or acid, they would have to use all kinds of powerful elemental attacks. The snow stopped after a day. Northtown Castle started clearing the snow in the morning. Luckily, the snow was not very thick. Sheriff Harrison was patrolling the town with the patrol team to check if there were any houses that had collapsed due to the snow. Boulder, on the other hand, was sent to the horse farm to see if the war horses were affected. The construction of the houses in the territory did not skimp and the heavy snow did not affect them too much. Because the troll tribe showed signs of moving south, Surin sent all the scouts to investigate. Even the drow Eden was sent out. As a drow proficient in assassination and investigation, Eden could be said to be the best scout in Northgard Castle. Sulen had sent half of the soldiers to escort the caravans, so there weren't many soldiers left in the territory. Sulen did not recruit a large number of ordinary serfs or refugees into the army. Those peasants who could not even hold a spear properly were just giving away military merits to others on the battlefield. Eden's silhouette flew past. Even though there was a heavy snowfall yesterday, there was only a thin layer of snow on the wasteland. The withered yellow grass was at least half a person's height, which was easy for a rogue to hide in. He was not unfamiliar with the environment here. After all, he had taken the scouts to explore the surrounding area to train them. Even so, Aiden was not careless at all. There were also rogues among the trolls. They could track their targets through footprints, smells, and traces of broken branches and trees. When facing these opponents, one careless mistake could lead to failure. Creak. Aiden tiptoed lightly on a big tree and then slowly landed on the ground. Because the trees were lush, there was not much snow in the forest. However, there was a thick layer of fallen leaves on the ground. It creaked when he stepped on it. There were many messy footprints on the ground. Although those people had disguised themselves when they left, in the eyes of an expert, they were still clearly visible like torches in the night. Eden reached out and wiped away the messy leaves. A trail appeared in front of him. Following the trace, Aiden found a few gray hairs on some leaves. Gnolls. There were indeed gnolls in the troll tribe. The number of trolls was limited. They would enslave other races to serve them. This troll tribe was likely to have enslaved a large number of gnolls as cannon fodder. After discovering the trace, Aiden's eyes flashed with a cold light, and a cruel expression appeared on his face. Even if they were drows who believed in the Dark Maiden, their cruel and cold genes were still engraved in their bones. Battles between scouts were very dangerous. Victory and defeat were often decided in an instant. The most common ones were encounters or ambushes. Even a Grand Knight could fail miserably in such a situation. A low-grade professional who was proficient in tracking, hiding, and traps could also kill enemies who were far more powerful than him. Aiden moved quickly along the traces in the grass. As an excellent rogue, his tracking skills were still very strong. These traces in front of him were left today. Brilliant rogues could even track traces left a few days or even a week ago. They could distinguish the height, weight, and type of the enemy through these traces. The main force of the troll tribe had not yet arrived. After all, there were still many things to prepare for the army. But even so, the trolls would come here in 3 days at most. Aiden was now encountering the troll tribe scouts. Shadow hide. After passing through a shadow, Aiden's figure gradually merged into the shadow and then disappeared. As a drow, his ears were very sensitive. Just now, he had heard some movements in the distance. Aiden's body was shrouded in shadows, and then he approached the direction of the sound. He was already close to the Sierra de Lotus. Soon Aiden found a cave hidden in the bushes. The outside of the cave was covered by vines. If one did not pay attention, it would be impossible to find it. It looked a little dark inside. At this time, there was some movement in the cave, but it quickly disappeared. After a while, a tall figure came out of the cave. The figure pushed aside the vines, and a gray coyote head popped out. It was a gnoll, but the corners of his mouth were obviously swollen. The gnoll looked around and then found a hidden corner near the entrance of the cave to hide. Obviously, this unlucky guy was arranged to keep watch. Chapter 139. They carefully avoided the traps and made sure that they didn't make any noise. At this distance, any mistake would alert them. After spending some time, Aiden bypassed the traps and began to approach the gnoll. The shadow was his best protection. Aiden's eyes flashed with a cold light. Backstab. Kidney strike. Throat cut. An icy cold light flashed past. The gnoll covered his throat with one hand, and the light in his eyes quickly dimmed. The gnoll's incredulous expression froze forever. Dark red blood slowly flowed out of his body. The gnoll's body twitched a few times, and then there was no more movement. He gently pulled out the dagger and took care of the hidden sentry. He slowly approached the entrance of the cave. Following the faint light from the cave, he saw the remaining 3 figures in the cave. The entrance of the cave was not big, but there was no cover. It was very difficult to approach quietly, but it was not impossible. Aiden took out a well-made crossbow from a pocket, strung it, and loaded an arrow. After making sure there were no mistakes, he walked directly into the cave. Poison Fong, didn't I tell you to keep watch outside? Why did you come in again? Did you not learn your lesson? Seeing the shadow suddenly appear at the entrance of the cave, the leading troll shouted angrily. However, the black figure completely ignored his words and continued to walk inside. No, it's an enemy. Just as he realized that something was wrong, Aiden suddenly raised his left hand, and a cold light instantly flew out. At such a close distance, the crossbow arrow flashed past and sank into the throat of a gnoll beside him. The gnoll had no time to dodge. He covered his throat and fell to the ground. After hearing the sound, another gnoll grabbed his weapon and prepared to attack. However, Aiden did not withdraw after firing the crossbow. On the contrary, he accelerated and rushed over. He pulled out a scimitar from behind and instantly slashed at the gnoll closest to him. The sudden outbreak of the battle was a life-and-death battle. There were no hundreds of rounds of battle, but more of a life-and-death battle in an instant. The gnoll subconsciously picked up his weapon to attack, but unfortunately, he was unprepared. His movements were a whole beat slower than Aiden's. By the time he picked up his weapon and prepared to attack, Aiden's long knife had already aimed at his neck. The sharp long knife directly cut through his throat, and smelly blood spurted out. The gnoll only felt that the strength in his body was quickly draining away. The weapon that could be easily swung became heavier and heavier. Whoosh! In the face of the attack, the troll reacted very quickly. When Aiden killed the two gnolls, his counterattack began. A javelin flew past in an instant. He only had time to turn his body sideways, and the javelin flew past his ear. The troll's movements were very fast. After throwing the javelin, the troll didn't care whether it hit the target or not. It just picked up its weapon and rushed forward. Aiden rolled on the ground and dodged the troll's follow-up attack. At the same time, he pulled out another scimitar and slashed at the troll's feet. After dodging several times, Aiden didn't panic at all. The scimitar in his hand kept blocking. The scimitar in his left hand slashed horizontally, and his right hand blocked the troll's weapon. Clang! A huge force came, and Aiden's body involuntarily retreated. The troll's strength was much higher than his. The scimitar in his left hand slashed at the troll's abdomen in an instant. Taking advantage of the huge force, Aiden took a few steps back and rushed forward again. The troll's self-healing ability was too strong. It was basically impossible to rely on bleeding to death. Aiden's two scimitars left afterimages. The troll roared and didn't show any weakness. The sound of metal colliding could be heard in the narrow cave. Countless scimitars intersected. Neither of them showed any weakness. Neither of them retreated. Wounds appeared on their bodies. Shadow raid. The flames flickered, alternating between light and darkness in the cave. At this time, Aiden's figure instantly merged with the shadows and appeared next to the troll. Aiden's eyes were cold. Without the slightest hesitation, the scimitar in his hand slashed at the troll's head. The troll didn't have time to dodge. It could only raise its hand to try to resist. Plop! A severed arm fell, and smelly blood spurted out. After losing an arm, the troll was no match for Aiden. After a short while, the other arm was also cut off. Aiden didn't directly kill the troll. After taking a breather and recovering his exhausted strength, he began to interrogate the troll. As a drow, Aiden was also proficient in all kinds of torture. It didn't take him much effort to get what he wanted. He cut off the troll's head and then threw the troll's body directly into the fire to burn. The troll's self-healing ability was very strong. In the absence of elemental spells, fire was the best way to kill them completely. In the dark night, the drow's figure moved quickly in the wilderness. The night gave him the best camouflage. The drow with night vision completely ignored the night. According to the information from the troll's mouth, the drow continued to investigate ahead. Bruce finally woke up after sleeping for a day and a night. Sulen personally pardoned his slave status. As a blacksmith, after experiencing the outbreak a few days ago, Bruce also successfully advanced to a master blacksmith. After gaining the status of a freedman, Bruce also wanted to express his loyalty to Sulen. Then, he became a new hero under Sulen. As a reward for Bruce's extraordinary weapon, Sulen gave him a house and 100 acres of farmland. With the property, Bruce's loyalty to Sulen directly rose to 90%. At the same time, this will also serve as a kind of publicity. Let the slaves work harder, and at the same time tell them that only hard work will change and they will get a better life. Bruce was still working in the blacksmith shop, but from now on, Sulen would have to pay him a monthly salary. Of course, if he could forge an extraordinary weapon, he would be rewarded accordingly. Since he was working by the piece, the more he worked, the more he would get. After learning about the treatment, Bruce happily accepted it. With a master blacksmith in charge, Su Len can continuously obtain extraordinary weapons. After arranging Bruce's matters, Su Len went to Hathaway's laboratory. According to the time, the purple dragon halberd will be officially completed today. When he arrived at the laboratory, Hathaway has already prepared the purple dragon halberd. After enchantment, there are many more runes on the purple dragon halberd. The whole purple dragon halberd doesn't look as sharp as yesterday. Su Len reached out and picked up the purple dragon halberd. It was slightly cold to the touch, and at the same time, there was a flash of lightning. Purple dragon halberd, category, spear +4, item grade, advanced magic item, 100 refined steel, meteor iron, tungsten steel, and amethyst as raw materials, carefully forged with cryopterous blood quenching, and then enchanted by an alchemist to become a powerful magic weapon. Equipment requirement, strength 14 or above, additional effect, sharpness +3, toughness +3, armor penetration +3, enchantment, thunder power, slow, thunder power, each attack will deal an additional 20 thunder damage. Damage can be stacked. When the damage is dealt, the target will be paralyzed. If the target's constitution is unable to resist the effect, their body will be stiff for 1 to 3 seconds. When using thunder power, the damage of thunder power will be increased by 30%. At the same time, the consumption will be reduced by 30%. Slow, after being quenched with cryopterous blood, each attack will deal an additional 5 ice damage and reduce the target's speed by 10%. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.